So I said the bracha, and then thanks to Deborah, I I just started recording. So if you're watching the recording and are wondering where the bracha was, I said it already. Um, so we're nearing the end of the book of Judges, and it's only chapter 19 and then chapter 20. So we should be preparing for the next volume in the series, which is the book of Samuel. So to have that ready, the ancient Israel, we'll have that for quite some time because the ancient Israel goes through the book of Kings. So Samuel's going to take a while. Kings will take a while. So anyway, so we'll be done with this in a couple weeks.
Do
So-
we need to purchase a new separate Samuel, or can we just use the Samuels we have around the house?
So if you wanted to,
Commentaries?
if you wanted to read along with the commentary that I'm using, I mean, I have the older edition of this, and I think I'm going to get the newer edition because the commentary is different between the new and the old, and I like the newer better than the old one. So,
The newer has Samuel?
well, I'll look, and I'll
have the
send the
old one.
link. What?
I have the old one, so I don't want to buy another Judges and
No, I get it. So, but
I bought it a while ago. I think this is the newer one.
yeah, it has to, the newer one would have a glossy cover to it. The older one has a papery cover to
yeah,
it.
that's what I have. Right.
So that's,
This is a papery cover.
you're right, and they could be paperback also. So the paperback would be the new one, the newer one. So anyway, I prefer this only because the commentary is based on the traditional medieval commentaries, which is the basis for our class since we started with Genesis 29 years ago. So that's why I would want to use this. Yeah, I guess the other option would be kind of hard to do this on Sepharia, because you can read this with Sepharia and then just highlight a verse and see all the commentaries on the verse. And I don't really want to do it that way. So,
Oh, on May 6th, I bought this. And this was the one you told us
yeah,
to get. So,
right.
we'll
If I-
see.
So if I just go quickly on Amazon right now to see what they have available for Sonsino book.
This is 1974.
Yeah, but here we go. Sonsino Books of the Bible, Samuel, 1962. It's $16.96 for the hardcover that I see, the first thing that comes up on Amazon. So look, do what you want to do. And so there's a difference between them. The newer edition that you can get, the better that it will be for what we're reading. And maybe you can find it used also. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to be using. So like I said, it'll be in a couple weeks. Okay, so we're starting chapter 19, and what I was about to say about it is that this is in some ways it's a very important story that we're about to read, and I will see kind of what the impact the story has on the relationship of the tribes with one another and on the future of the people of Israel. It is, and then we'll also think about why really when we're talking about Jewish history and the development of the people of Israel, why is there not as much of a focus on this story? In other words, people think about Samuel, people, and the transition to the kings of Israel, where people are very familiar with Saul, David, and Solomon. But why aren't people so familiar with the book of Judges and this story? And so we'll take a look at it, and you'll see what I mean in a few moments. Vayehi. So we remember that we had finished the story of this judge Micha, who set up a place of worship in his home, and he set up Leviim there to work in his place, and this was the alternative site to the Mishkan that was in Shiloh. That's how chapter 18 ended. Vayehi bayamim hahem umelech ein b'Yisrael vayehi ish Levi gar b'yarketei har Ephraim vayikach lo isha filegesh mi Beit Lechem Yehuda. So there, at that time, when there was no king in Israel, that's what we're told in chapter 18 also. So just an interesting formulation that we have here, because we don't have it in the rest of the book of Judges at this time when there was no king in Israel. It's only here at the end of the book that we get this. And there was a particular Levite man living at the edge or the outskirts of the Ephraimite hill country, and he takes for himself a concubine from Beit Lechem in Judah. Okay, and we came across Beit Lechem in Judah in the previous story as well. Okay, so we have this Levite who takes a concubine from Beit Lechem in Judah. Okay, doesn't seem anything untoward right now. Vatizne alav pilag sho, vatelech meito el Beit Aviha, el Beit Lechem Yehuda, vatehi sham yamim arba'a chodashim. So she, how would I translate this? The literal the translation here says, and his concubine played the harlot. So I guess that would be a fitting translation here. His concubine, tizne alav. That means she was unfaithful to him, but okay, but the root is the root for harlot or prostitute. So he has this concubine who we assume is supposed to be committed to him. So in other words, verse 1 said he took for himself a concubine woman, but you could translate this, he took for himself a wife, a concubine. So what difference would it make in status between a wife and a concubine? That's unclear. Is he married to somebody else so that he has a wife and now he has a concubine? It's unclear. But what makes clear is that in verse 1 is that she is supposed to be loyal to him by purchasing her. Vayikachlo, he took for himself. The took there in this context, when taking a woman, it's taking in a contractual sense that you're purchasing, and it's and there's a sense of loyalty and commitment that's supposed to be there, and then in verse 2, that loyalty and commitment goes out the window. She plays the harlot, and she went to her father's house. She left him and went to her father's house in Beit Lechem Yehuda, and she was there for 4 months. Vayakam Isha. Okay, so the way Isha is spelled here and there's a dot in the hay. So technically it should be pronounced Isha with a little at the end. So that means her man. Okay? So her man got up, Vayelech achareha, and he chased after her. Ledaber al liba lahashiva. So it's written as if it should be read lahashivo. The asterisk there says, below the line there in a very tiny print, you're supposed to read it lahashiva. So he went after her to speak to her heart, that is to convince her, lahashiva, to return her, like to bring her back. V'na'aro imo, v'tsemed chamorim, v'teviehu beit aviha, v'yirehu aviha na'ara, v'yismach likrato. Okay, so the whole verse again. Her husband or her man, because it's unclear if it's a husband, because she's a concubine. So her man got up, went after her to speak to her heart, to convince her to bring her back, and he has a servant with him, a young lad. Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Who would the Levite have purchased the concubine from? Would it not from the father?
You would think from the father, yes. Yeah, so
just-
it doesn't say the process here, but that's how it would be done, yes.
Okay.
If, the traditional wording of ketubas today have in there the language that a price is agreed upon with the bride's father's house. So, or like she's from her father's house. So that's if the father of the bride is still alive at the time of the wedding, and if not, then the ketubah says herself, that he bought her herself. So
Rabbi,
yes, Dov.
as it says she's there only 4 months.
Yes.
So couldn't we perhaps think in terms that maybe she's a young woman that has not any experience and she's been sold by her father, and she's rebelling?
It's unclear. We really don't know. There's a lot that's unsaid in this story. One thing about the 4 months is that for the rabbis, if a couple gets divorced, the wife has to wait at least 3 months before she can get married again to prove that she's not pregnant from her ex-husband.
Right.
So does the 4 months have something to do with that too? That she's clearly not pregnant from him, but she's playing the harlot. So who knows if she's definitely been intimate with somebody else.
Okay.
So the fact that the Bible is telling us that she's playing the harlot, so we know that something's wrong with her. We don't know what's wrong with him.
Okay.
We don't know why she left him. A number of questions about this. Okay, so who does he purchase her from? So Alan's question too. So we're assuming he purchased her from her father. Okay, so now verse 3. We're in chapter 19, verse 3 now. Her man got up, went after her to convince her to bring her back home. And he has his servant with him and a group of donkeys. It says here a couple of donkeys, but I don't know what semed actually means. Alter translates it as, it says a pair of donkeys. So, okay, so it is a pair of donkeys. And she brought him to her father's house, and he saw him, that is the father of this woman, of this young woman, and he was happy to greet him. So there are too many hymns here, but we're assuming it's the father of the concubine and the Levite. So she brings him, that is her husband, her man, to her father's house. And he, her father, sees him, the man that she's a concubine to, and he was happy to see him. So verse 4, and then we'll look at let's go through verse 9, because that's what the commentary says. The unit is through verse 9. Verse 4, we're on page 298. Vayachazek bo chotno avi hana'ara, vayeshev ito shloshet yamim, vayochlu vayishtu vayalinu sham. So the father of the young woman, who is the father-in-law, held on to him. So it says here, retained him, but vayechazek bo literally means held on to him. So and kind of made him stay with him 3 days, and they ate and they drank and they and lodged there. Verse 5, Vayihi bayom harevi'i, vayashkimu vaboker, vayakam lalechet, vayomer avi hana'ara el chatano, sa'ad libacha pat lechem, va'achar telechu. So on the fourth day, they got up in the morning and prepared to leave. And the father of the young woman said to his son-in-law, eat your fill, some bread, and then go your way. Like, have breakfast before you go. 6, Vayeshvu, vayochlu shnehem yachdav, vayishtu, vayomer avi hana'ara el ha'ish, ho'elna velin vayitav libecha. So they sat and ate, the two of them together, and they drank. And the father of the young woman said to the man, I pray you, stay longer, and may your heart be good, or let your heart be merry. Like, you should stay here longer, and be happy here. But verse 7, Vayakom ha'ish lalechet, vayiftsar bo chotno, vayashav vayalen sham. So the man got up to go, and the father-in-law urged him, and he stayed and lodged there some more. 8, Vayashkem baboker bayom hachamishi lalechet, vayomer avi hana'ara sa'adna levavacha v'hit ma he mehu, or v'hit ma mehu. The first hey there with the shava is silent. V'hit ma mehu ad netot hayom vayochlu shnehem. So he got up in the morning of the 5th day to go, and the father of the young woman says, eat your fill and stay or tarry until the day ends. And the two of them ate. 9, Vayakam. Yes?
Is the word here for the young girl is damsel? Is that nubile, meaning unmarried?
No, it's just I think it's older English, and it just means how old. Like, there are different terms for how old a person is. I don't know, as a damsel, as opposed to I don't know. My English isn't that good to come up with different terms for women at different ages. So it's just the equivalent of what I'm saying, young woman.
Okay. I'm just
It
curious.
says not in terms, she's not, it's not as unmarried because we know that she's already been sexually intimate with not just her man, but other people.
But it says father-in-law, son-in-law, so that has to be married.
Yes, but again, but married in a sense that she's a concubine. So I don't know what the impact of that is. Like, why does the Bible tell us in verse 1 that he takes her to be a concubine? So, so that there's got to be some import to that designation of her, that label, that even though the rest of the story sounds like she's the wife, verse 1 tells us so that we don't forget she's a concubine. Okay, but again, I don't know the impact of that in terms of what's going to happen for the rest of the story.
Rabbi, is this the same status as Hagar?
No, the status of Hagar, well, Hagar started as a concubine. Hagar started as a maid to Sarah, and Sarah urges Abraham to marry her, so to raise her in status from a maid to a wife.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was a concubine. It wasn't. The Torah doesn't use the term concubine to describe Hagar, or so we have in this week's portion, Rachel and Leah being given Bilhah and Zilpah, and but they also, Jacob sleeps with them too. So are they concubines or are they wives? So certainly for the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob are all equal in status. There could be a difference between a son of a concubine and a son of a wife in terms of inheriting property or status within the family, that a concubine's son might not be as equal to everybody else. But in the Torah, the Hagar, like Yishmael, and the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, all equal in status.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
But since there was no marriage ceremony in those days, wasn't it considered if you slept with somebody, you were married?
Yeah, but for what we read in the Torah, there is some action taking place of vayikach, and he took. So whatever the taking is, it's not defined in terms of a ceremony. That doesn't happen in the Torah or in the Bible at all. There's no ceremony described. It's up to the rabbis in the Mishnah to describe what the ceremony is and to tell us what the document is that has to be signed. So Torah and Bible don't know of anything like that, so we can only surmise what took place. For the rabbis say that what they instituted happened back in the Torah too. So they would say that there was a ketubah and there was some kind of chuppah or ceremony. But that's only the rabbis putting their stuff back into the Torah. So it's not, we shouldn't read it that way, but we should say something happened. Some agreement was reached among the parties so that everybody knew that a formal agreement had been reached. Okay? Okay, so it's the 5th day, and they're eating together some more. And verse 9, 299, Vayakom ha'ish lalechet, hu ufilagsho v'na'aro, vayomer lo chotno, avi ha'na'ara, hinena rafa hayom la'arov, linuna, hine chanot hayom, lin po, vayitav levavecha, vehishkamtem machar ledarkechem, vehalachta leohalecha. So the man arises after eating all day, arises to go, he and his concubine and his servant and his father-in-law, the father of the young lady, says to him, hey, the day is waning, the evening is coming on, stay overnight, because the day is gone. Sleep here, and your hearts should be good, like you'll be happy, and then get up tomorrow to go on your way, and you can go back to your tent. Okay, so for some reason, the father-in-law keeps encouraging the son-in-law to stay extra days. So this is into the sixth day now. So let's stop here and look at the commentary on these 9 verses so far. Back to 296, the bottom right, the outrage at Gibeah. So I'm just, as I said earlier, that something terrible is going to be happening in this story. And we haven't gotten to the terrible thing yet. A Levite of Mount Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem of Judah. She deserted him and returned home. After a time, the man paid her a visit, was welcomed by her father, and persuaded her to go back with him. Okay, I don't want to read the rest of the introduction because it's going to give away the story. So let's not do that. So 1 to 9. So we're on towards the bottom of the left column of 297 in the commentary. No king in Israel, see chapter 18, verse 1, where we saw that formulation before. The farther side, that is the edge, what I said, the outskirts of the Ephraimite hill country, on the northern part of the central highland, on the more retired portion, no town is mentioned. Took to him a concubine, better, he took to him a woman as concubine. So that is, according to Da'at Mikra, translating it as woman and not wife, is how it should be understood. Again, how I said it, Isha is more like in the category of wife. So what it means why it needed to say Isha along with Pilegesh. It could have just said Pilegesh. Vayikach lo Pilegesh. So why it had to say Isha Pilegesh, I don't know what that means in terms of the legal status that means. Bethlehem and Judah, the preceding narrative was also connected with the Levite and Bethlehem. Against him, literally upon him, an unparalleled preposition with the verb played the harlot. Kimchi explains as while still with him. That is, in other words, the Hebrew, pointing out the Hebrew, vatizne alav pilaksho. So the alav, the Hebrew doesn't need the word alav. The fact that vatizne, that she became a harlot, is enough. Why add the alav? Just to emphasize the idea that she was being intentionally unfaithful to him in her going off and being sexually intimate with somebody else. The space of 4 months, literally days, 4 months, often yamim denotes year, and according to Kimchi, the text should either be rendered as though the conjunction and stood before for, making the phrase mean a year and 4 months. Or the term 4 months is in apposition to yamim, and the phrase is to be understood as a number of days, namely 4 months. See the Hebrew text of Genesis 24:55. It seems from context that it's 4 months, not a year and 4 months. Verse 3, the man's attitude recalls that of the prophet Hosea. So in other words, the prophet Hosea is a prophet who, for much of the book of Hosea, he's living a life. So prophets usually speak in metaphors and prophesy about a number of images to get their message across. Hosea lived the image that he's trying to get across. So Hosea was teaching the people that they have gone astray from God and have acted and been unfaithful, as a wife might be unfaithful to her husband by going off with somebody else. That's the message that Hosea teaches most of the book of Hosea. And so he lives that, in that his own wife became the prostitute, and he is directed by God to bring the wife back home. And so as Hosea brings the wife back home, so too does God bring the people of Israel back to him. Okay, so that's the unusual life that Hosea is living, so that his real life becomes the metaphor for the relationship of the people of Israel to God. Okay, so here,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yes, Bess?
No, no, no. I want to finish your thought. I have a question as to geography and timing. She goes home by herself to her father. How far away is this on the hill country of Ephraim and the concubine out of Bethlehem?
Right. So we don't. If the Bethlehem of Judah is the Bethlehem today, Bethlehem is just south of Jerusalem. It's the first major town you get to, heading directly south on the road from Jerusalem, which today means you have to go through a checkpoint into Palestinian territory to get to Bethlehem. And the hill country of Ephraim is further. It's way north from Jerusalem, on the way to the Galilee, but before you get to the Galilee. So it's a long way. It's more than a day's journey at that time, because you're walking or you're riding a camel or a donkey. So I don't know how many miles you can do in a day if you're riding a camel or a donkey. If you're healthy and able-bodied, you can walk maybe 20 miles in a day. But if you're on a donkey, maybe you can go double that. So maybe it's a 2 days journey, something like that.
By herself.
I don't know if it's by herself. It says it's by herself, but it doesn't. Did she really go by herself, or did she have an entourage, or at least a person to protect her? We don't know.
Okay, so if it's 2 days each way, sometime during his stay, this Levite, that he's with the father-in-law and his wife, there's a Shabbos in there.
So
It's not mentioned. It's not
Shabbos is hardly ever mentioned in the Torah and the Bible.
interesting. And he's a Levite. Okay.
So I don't so it's interesting that you're bringing that up.
I'm wondering if the woman is Jewish, if the father-in-law is Jewish.
We
An
assume,
Israelite. Right.
we assume that they're Israelites, because
Okay.
the Torah, I think the Bible would tell us if the person is not an Israelite. Like in the Samson story, it told us about the Philistine women. The fact that it's not telling us is that she is from Beit Lechem in Yehudah, we assume she's an Israelite. But it's just interesting that you're thinking about Shabbos here, because the Bible is not thinking about Shabbos. So, and if it would only bring up Shabbos if Shabbos was crucial to the story, and it's not. What's crucial to the story is this concubine. So we'll get there. So okay, all right. So we're still in verse 3 in the commentary on the bottom right on 297. Kindly, literally on her heart. The idea is to exert persuasion. A couple of asses carrying provisions and gifts and providing transport into her father's house. Evidently, the first meeting took place elsewhere, perhaps in or near the women's quarters. 298, retained, literally took hold of. The verb almost suggests the use of physical restraint. The woman's father, as the following verses show, was reluctant to let him go. Stay thy heart, etc. See Genesis 18. When the stomach is full, it presses against the diaphragm, and so against the heart, which rests upon it, and is accordingly literally supported. The phrase occurs in Latin and is more than a metaphor. A morsel of bread, Oriental hospitality was modest in its claims, but lavish in its execution. Be content, better consent. Let thy heart be merry, that is, enjoy yourself. The phrase is used of the effect of a feast, especially of wine drinking. Rose, that is, he rose to leave despite his father-in-law's invitation to stay the night. Tarry ye until the day declineth. The request to stay until the day declined is strange, since it would be dangerous for a traveler to set out towards evening. That the host was aware of this is seen from verse 9. Perhaps by the decline of the day, he meant afternoon, when the sun begins to incline towards the west, or the shadow on the dial declines. Alternatively, the verb translated "and tarry ye" may be the third person plural with the ordinary conjunction and should be rendered "and they tarried." Okay, 9, draweth, literally has weakened. The expression "the day has weakened" has its origin in the synonymous use of day and sun, and signifies that the sun has weakened or lost its heart. See the cuneiform sign for day, which is the same as for sun. Toward evening, this was true because after they had traveled about 2 hours, night fell. And that's verse 10. So we'll get there momentarily. Grows to an end, literally the camping of, that is, the time when men rest. Okay, let's see verses 1 to 9 in Alter. So that's on 203 in ancient Israel. A Levite. Though nothing further is made in the story of his status as Levite, and no reference is made to any sacerdotal function performed by him, there is an obvious link with the morally dubious Levite lad in the immediately preceding story. Hereditary connection with the cult is clearly no guarantee of character. Okay, we'll see what happens. Played the whore against him. Given that a man and his concubine are involved, this could refer to sexual infidelity, but the fact that she goes off to her father's house and that he wants her back argues for the metaphorical sense of this idiom. She pulled away from him, no longer wanted to remain with him. Yeah, okay, but I would argue against that just because of the word that the Bible chose to describe her going back home. So if she just was fed up with him or just didn't want to be with him anymore, the Bible should have chosen a word about that. The fact that it chose a word with the root Zayin Nun Hey has to imply, and it doesn't mean anything else other than prostitution in any other context in the Bible. I would argue against Alter's reading of it. And also might impact what happens to her and what her husband, the Levite, did to her. That we'll read soon. Okay, 3, his lad was with him in a pair of donkeys. Both servant and donkey will have a role to play as the story darkens. Rejoiced to greet him. The rejoicing may be from the father's perception that his daughter and the Levite will now be reconciled. But there is an odd emphasis in the story that the father is somehow smitten with the Levite to the exclusion of concern for his daughter. The young woman's, the fact that she is young, a na'ara, will make what ensues all the more painful. 204, a morsel of bread. This is polite understatement for a full meal. Enjoy good cheer. This mood idiom usually implies feasting and drinking. His father-in-law pressed him and he stayed. In this story that turns on the refusal and then violation of hospitality, the father-in-law's importuning of his guest looks in its exaggeration like a grotesque parody of hospitality. The two of them ate, the Levite and his father-in-law. The concubine is not part of the feast. The day was waning. The day is declining toward evening. This proliferation of expressions for the approach of night underscores the zone of danger into which the Levite and his concubine will enter as night falls. Okay, setting the stage now for what's about to happen. So let's get to it. Verse 10. V'lo ava ha'ish lalun, vayakom vayelech vayavo ad nochach Yevus, hi Yerushalayim, ve'imo tzemed chamarim chavushim ufilagsho imo. So remember, this is the 6th day now, and the man didn't want to stay overnight, so he got up to go, and he came close to Yevus, which is Jebusite, but it's the capital of the Jebusite kingdom, which is, so the capital city is called Yevus, and which is Jerusalem. So it wasn't called Jerusalem yet, I don't think. Well, it's unclear. So for the reader is reading this at a time when Jerusalem exists. Okay, so we don't know when the book of Judges was written. It's describing events before the establishment of the kingdom of Israel and before David establishes the capital in Jerusalem, which he had to conquer from the Jebusites. So was it known as Jerusalem? Now, remember that the king of Shalem, Melchizedek, in Genesis, came to greet Abraham after Abraham had defeated the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, the kings of the Dead Sea area when he got Lot back from captivity. Melchizedek came out to greet him. It says in the Torah, Melchizedek, the king of Shalem. So commentators think that that's Jerusalem. So, because it has that root, the shalom, the peace part of Jerusalem in it. So it's unclear. So that's all I'm pointing out, that they came up to Yevus. So it was known as Yevus in the time of Judges. That is Jerusalem. So that's, in other words, the writer of the story is writing at a time when people know the city as Jerusalem. How much after the time of this, when the story took place, how much time elapsed, we don't know. Okay. And he has with him the pair of donkeys that were saddled. And his concubine was with him. Okay, so he took his servant, his concubine, his saddled donkeys, and they left Bethlehem and they got to Jerusalem. Now, if it's the Bethlehem of today, to get to Jerusalem is not far, and I mean, there is a road now, there's a paved road now, but it's clear that that paved road is on a road that had existed from ancient times. And so it's a well-traveled route, so it might not have been so dangerous to travel that route from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. And that we're talking 10 miles, something like that. Okay.
It doesn't say his servant was with him.
Yes, it does. Oh, no, yes.
The man,
The
they
man.
were with him, the asses, his concubine.
Oh, you're right. And it's right. It doesn't say the servant. You're right. Sorry. 11. Haim im Yevus, v'hayom rad ma'od, v'yomer hana'ar el Adonav, lechana v'nasura el ir hayevusi hazot v'nalin ba. So while they got to Yevus, and the day was gone, there's a song that was sung at all the Camp Ramah camps at the end of the evening activity before the kids go back to their bunk. And it starts off, Rad Hayom, like the day has gone. Rad Hayom, Shemesh Dom, Kochavim, Notzatzim, Bamarom. That's everybody who's gone to Camp Ramah for the past 50 years knows that song as the song to sing at the end of the evening activity before going back to the bunk. Anyway, so it comes from the Bible. It's a Hayom Rad Ma'od. So it's really, the day is is almost done. And the servant, so the servant wasn't there in verse 10, but it's assumed that the servant was there, because now the servant says to his master, let me go to the city of Yavuz. Let us go to the city of Yavuz, this city of Yavuz, and let's stay there. 12, Vayomer elav Adonav, lo nasur el ir nochri, asher lo mi b'nei Yisrael hena, va'avarnu ad giv'ah. So the master says to him, we will not go to this foreign city that is not from the tribe, the people of Israel. Let's keep going until we get to Giv'ah or Gibeah. Okay, so clearly they're Israelite, or at least this guy is Israelite. Well, we know he's a Levi, so he's an Israelite, and he doesn't want to take chances in being in a Jebusite city. Okay, for some reason he doesn't want to take chances there. We don't know anything of the relationship between, like here's this city of Yavuz in the midst of Israelite territory, right? So Bethlehem is in the tribe of Judah. Then you get to the city of Jerusalem, and then you get beyond Jerusalem, you're back in Israelite territory again. So how is it that this Jebusite city is able to exist in isolation in the midst of Israelite territory? So that's a question for another time, for scholars to try to figure out. But here, the Levite is saying to his servant, no, we're not going to this foreign city. Let's go to Gibeah. 13. Vayomer lena'aro, lecha v'nikreva be'achad hamakomot, velanu vagiv'ah, o varama. So he says to his servant, let's go and get close to one of these places, and we'll lodge in either Gibeah or Ramah. So it's towns outside of Jerusalem, but it's unclear if it's south of Jerusalem, west of Jerusalem, north of Jerusalem. We don't know. Maybe the commentary will help us, but we don't know exactly where in relationship to Jerusalem these towns are. 14. Vaya'avru vayelechu, vatavo lahem hashemesh, etzel hagivah, asher levinyamin. So they kept going, and they went, and the sun finally went down, by Gibeah, which is in the territory of Benjamin. So that's north of Jerusalem. So they passed by, either way, they went around Jerusalem, either on the west or the east, and they went to the north of Jerusalem in Benjamin territory, and they got to the town of Gibeah, just as night fell. 15, Vayasuru sham, lavo lalun bagiv'ah, vayavo vayeshev berachov ha'ir, ve'ein ish me'asefotam habayata lalun. This is an important part of the story too. So they go there to find a place to lodge in Gibeah. So they went and they were sitting in the street of the city, and nobody's coming out to gather them in to their house to lodge. Like nobody was being hospitable to say, come on in, it's nighttime, you're strangers here, it's safer, come into our house. Nobody was doing hachnasat orchim, welcoming the stranger, okay, welcoming guests. So 16, v'hinei ish zaken, ba min ma'asehu min hasadeh ba'erev, v'ha'ish mehar Ephraim, v'hu gar b'giv'ah, v'anshei hamakom b'nei yamini. So there was an old man. He came in from doing his work in the field in the evening, and he's from the Ephraimite hill country, just like this Levite is. And he's living in Gibeah, and the people of the place, the people of Gibeah, are B'nai Yemini, are Benjaminites. 17, Vayisa einav, Vayar et ha'ish ha'oreach b'rachov ha'ir, Vayomer ha'ish hazaken, Ana telech umeyayin tavo. So he lifted up his eyes, and he sees the man, ha'ish ha'oreach, the wayfaring man, the traveling man. So it's interesting. So, an oreach today in modern Hebrew is a guest. But an oreach in this context makes more sense. Like if the mitzvah is hachnasat orchim, welcoming in a guest, well, the person's a guest once you welcome them. They're not a guest until you invite into your house. Once you invite this person into your house, then he becomes a guest in your house. Until he's your guest, he's just a stranger that you're meeting. So, in other words, it doesn't make sense that the mitzvah is to welcome guests in your house. What makes sense is that you're going out of your way to welcome somebody that you're not so familiar with, to welcome that person that you're not familiar with into your house. That takes some doing on your part to welcome that person in. Like, in other words, but it's a person that you're going to trust because it's a fellow Jew. Okay, so it was common throughout Jewish history for there to be Jews coming to town, to a Jewish neighborhood of town, and for those Jews then to be welcomed into Jewish homes for Shabbat. Okay, so the reason we do Kiddush in shul on Friday night and not at home is because sometimes people stayed in the synagogue for Shabbat, and that was the place that they would sleep, but they would be treated to food and drink in the synagogue. Okay? So, but the idea, so the oreach then is not a guest. It's the person who could potentially become a guest. It's the traveling person. So he lifts up his eyes and sees the traveling person in the street of the city, and the old man says, "Where are you going and where are you coming from?" 18, Vayomer elav, Ovrim anachnu mi Beit Lechem Yehuda ad Yarketei Har Ephraim, Misham anochi, Va'elech ad Beit Lechem Yehuda, Ve'et Beit Adonai ani holech, Ve'en ish ma'asefoti habayita. So he says to him, we're just traveling from Beit Lechem in Judah to the edges of the Ephraimite hill country. That's where I'm from. And I went to Beit Lechem Yehuda, and I'm going to the house of God. Remember in chapter 18, we read about the house of God that Micha set up, which is another Levi is there to set up the Levites who are working in that house of God. So I'm going to that house of God, and nobody has brought me home, brought me into their home. So that's why I'm out in the street. I'm coming from Judah. I'm from Bethlehem in Judah. I'm going to the edges of the Ephraimite hill country where that house of God is. And in the meantime, right now, nobody has brought me home. 19. V'gam teven gam mispo yesh lacham orenu. V'gam lechem v'yayin yesh li. V'la amatecha. V'la na'ar im avadecha. Ein machsor kol davar. So there is straw, and it says provender as a translation of the word mispo. We got the food for our donkeys, and we have bread and wine, and for your handmaid, and to the young man that is with your servants. There's nobody's lacking anything. So who's saying this? It seems maybe is the Levite still talking, and if he is, we're in the street, but we got we're taken care of. We got our food, we have everything we need. Or is it the old man who says, I got this stuff for you? Unclear. Okay, well, it seems like it's the Levite who is still talking. 20, Vayomer ha'ish hazaken, shalom lach, rak kol machsorcha alai, rak barachov al talin. Or it says talan, but it's supposed to be talin. So the old man says, peace be unto you. What, anything that you lack should be upon me. Don't sleep in the street. In other words, a formal way of saying, come home with me. 21, Vayaviehu leveto, Vayaval lachamorim, Vayirchatsu raglehem, Vayochlu vayishtu. So he brought him to his house, and he took care of, he fed the donkeys, washed their feet, and they ate and they drank. 22. Hema meitivim et libam, vehine anshe ha'ir, anshe v'nei v'liya'al, nasabu et habayit, mit dabakim al hadalet, vayomru el ha'ish, ba'al habayit hazaken, lemor, hotzei et ha'ish, asher ba el beitecha, v'neda'enu. Okay. Before I translate this is a reminder of Lot and the angels who come to Lot in Sodom, and what the people of Sodom say to Lot when they knock on Lot's door, asking for Lot to send the men that he's hosting out to them. So they're meitivim et libam. They are satisfying themselves, that is, with the food and the drink. And the men of the city, men of, it says in the English, certain base fellows. So Anshe B'nai B'liya'al is no goodniks. It would be a good way to translate that. These people up to no good. They are no moral character. They were surrounded the house. Mit dabakim al hadelet. So that's an interesting form of the word. So it normally would be dofkim al hadelet. So you're knocking on the door. Mit dabakim is an extra emphasis. They're knocking, and it's just the door is knocking back. So it's they're beating at the door. It says so. It's not just knocking; they're pounding away on the door, and they are saying to the man, the owner of the house, the old man. They said to him, "Send out the man who came to your house, so that we may know him." Okay, not like, hey, we want to get to know your guest and just schmooze with him. No. Then let us know him is the same word that the men of Sodom said to Lot, what they wanted to do to the angels who were hosted by Lot. And this, in this context, lada'at means to have a sexual encounter with. Okay, so send out this guy. We want to have our way with him. Okay, now it's 10:30 and we have to stop here. So we will look at the commentary on these verses next time, and we'll look at ancient Israel on this next time as well. So remember that this is an important story in the history of Israel, what happens here. Okay, so stop here for today. Hope everybody has a Shabbat Shalom, and see you next Friday.
Shabbos.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jonah.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.